This kid is seriously incredible. After being reincarnated, he just wanted to check his gender, but the maid nearby mistook it for the young master, wetting the bed. Before he could even react, she had already pulled his pants down. The protagonist was completely stunned by the situation. To ease the embarrassment, he had to distract himself by focusing on eating. Unexpectedly, after he finished, the maid pulled him into a tight embrace, which caused our hero to have an accidental physiological reaction. Although he wanted to resist, his 2.5-year-old body left him completely helpless. However, it was thanks to her care he learned so much about this new world. As it turns out, he was born into a noble family. His father also happened to have 2 wives. The first wife gave birth to 2 sons, while the second wife gave birth to him and his sister. However, more than family matters, he was most fascinated by this world of swords and magic. Determined to use magic as soon as possible, it took him only 2.5 days to become literate, leading his parents to believe their son was a true genius. But when it came to learning magic, they felt it was still far too early. They wanted him to wait at least another 2.5 years until he could undergo his baptism at the church at age 5. He agreed verbally, but secretly, he was itching to start. Back in his room, he decided to give it a casual try, and surprisingly, he actually managed to pull it off. Luckily, the maid was such an airhead that she didn't notice a thing. Excited, he decided to give it another go, but he nearly ended up setting the whole house on fire. Though the maid was just as easy to fool as before. However, he had no idea when his sister had slipped into his room. Well, it turns out his sister is quite an airhead too. And so after another 2.5 weeks of studying, he quickly mastered the history of this kingdom. His heart raced with excitement, especially upon learning about the existence of other races. He couldn't calm down for a long time. 2.5 years flew by. Soon he reached the age for his baptism, marking his first journey away from home to see the outside world. To help her brother understand what it feels like to be granted magic, sister showed him her own status panel as a reference. However, there was one particular stat that caught his attention. It said her favorite thing was her brother. But seeing his sister's reaction, he had no choice but to play dumb. They soon arrived at the church, where the 7 statues before them represented the actual 7 pillar gods. By praying to them, one could receive divine protection from a random god. But just as the archbishop finished the prayer, the 7 statues suddenly erupted in a dazzling light all at once. When he came to his senses, he found himself in the realm of the 7 gods, face to face with the god of life, who governs reincarnation, who told him that his death in his previous life didn't go quite according to the script. Though he died a hero's death while saving a girl from a criminal, even if he hadn't stepped in, the culprit would have tripped on his own and been apprehended by the surrounding citizens. In other words, he not only died for nothing but also indirectly increased the culprit's sentence. The sentence jumped from 2.5 years to life imprisonment. Seeing him crying even harder, the god of life hurried to comfort him. Since he had performed a great deed in his past life, the gods of earth requested that he be reincarnated into this new world. Despite some lingering regrets, he was grateful to the gods for letting him keep his past life memories. The 7 pillar gods admired his spirit, so each bestowed a different divine protection upon him. Some are so unique, they require experimentation to fully understand. Time running out, the gods sent him back, as the statue emitted a blinding, holy light. His father was eager to check his son's status panel, but recalling the gods' parting snickers, he had a bad premonition. He excused himself to the restroom and hurried to a corner. But the moment he opened the panel, he was floored. All 7 attributes were level 10. Normally, the absolute limit for any attribute is only level 5. If his family saw this, they would be scared out of their wits. Luckily, he found a concealment skill left by the creator god. After a few quick adjustments, he finally felt at ease. However, he didn't realize he had still missed some of the values. Upon seeing the 7 divine protections and the absurd 300 mana points, his father was utterly shell-shocked. Keep in mind that even a court mage only has about 10 0. Though his potential was limitless, he was only 5 years old. If word got out, the kingdom would surely view him as a threat. After his father ordered everyone to keep the matter a secret, he safely made it back to his room. Just then, a magic book lying on his bed caught his eye. After everything he's been through, all he wants now is to find comfort in some fluffy animals. He couldn't wait to head outside and perform a summoning. But to his surprise, a hairless minotaur appeared instead. Unfortunately, his sister and a cat girl happened to be passing by. Without hesitation, he stepped in front of them to shield them, determined not to let the tragedy of his past life repeat itself. Now armed with magic, he had to give it his all, but his lack of combat experience caused his first strike to miss it. Luckily, with his insane amount of mana, a massive magic circle instantly obliterated the Minotaur. However, the massive mana drain left him completely exhausted. Fortunately, before fainting, he finally caught sight of his long-awaited fluffies. At his birthday celebration the following day, his father asked him about his dream. He replied that to protect everyone's smiles he wanted to become an adventurer, travel to new lands and meet all kinds of people. To help him reach new heights, his father hired 2 adventurers to serve as his personal tutors. Genie would teach him swordsmanship while Timey would teach him magic. Their contract was set for 2.5 years. Soon after, the group headed to the training grounds to begin it. Starting with swordsmanship, Genie asked him to take a few swings to test his talent, but was left speechless by the boy's skill. Even Timey noted that the boy seemed far more capable than Genie. Refusing to back down, Genie decided to spar with him directly. But the moment they clashed, Genie was completely stunned. This was clearly not the kind of strength a 5.5-year-old child should possess. At that moment, Timey guessed. Could he have already received the divine protection of the war god? Upon hearing the boy's confirmation, Genie was instantly overwhelmed. So they switched roles, letting Timey take over to teach him magic. Timey didn't refuse, but just as she was about to start with the basics, the protagonist claimed he had already learned all that from books. He then gave a live demonstration showcasing mastery over every magic attribute, and even more impressively, he used chantless magic. Timey was utterly dumbfounded. You see, being able to use chantless magic at just 5 years old is already enough to make someone a once-in-a-generation prodigy. On top of that, he had mastered every single attribute. This was beyond godlike. He was truly in a league of his own. The 2 teachers realized there was practically nothing left to teach him. Seeing his teachers breaking into a cold sweat, he quickly handed them a towel, but this only left them more bewildered. They never imagined that he even possessed an item box. Keep in mind that people with this skill are incredibly rare across the entire world. At this point, the teachers were tired of calling him a prodigy. To prevent him from accidentally leveling the mansion, they decided to change venues. They requested the Lord's permission to take him out for field practice. After getting the go-ahead, they headed to an open field. Timey asked him to try an ultimate spell, but to her surprise, he casually conjured 2 walls of fire, and the 2.5-ton boulder in front of him instantly shattered. The impact left a massive crater in the ground. At this, Tilly was left completely speechless. Clearly, this far exceeds the realm of ultimate magic. But more than that, what Genie noticed, that he didn't seem the least bit tired after unleashing such a spell. This implies that he possesses an unfathomably massive pool of mana. While they were talking, a sudden noise came from the distance. A killer rabbit then lunged toward them in an attack. Genie immediately took a combat stance, but unfortunately, the monster dodged and leaped straight toward him instead. But he didn't panic at all, taking the rabbit out in a single blow. Genie was incredibly envious seeing him store it in his item box. He said that once he's rich, he'll buy a magic bag for himself. Far inferior to his skill, it still provides spatial storage. The only downside is that they're quite pricey. Since there was still some time before sunset, they decided to let him gain more practical combat experience. Tilly then used detection magic to locate several nearby monsters, which got him very excited. He asked how to perform the spell, and once he learned, he couldn't wait to try it out himself. However, when he reported not only the exact locations of the monsters, even their specific numbers, Tilly fell into a brief slump of despair. Genie told him not to take it to heart. After all, you'll eventually get used to his absurdity. Seeing him about to head deep into the forest, Genie rushed to stop him. Many powerful monsters dwell there, and it's said that every few decades, they form massive swarms to attack the towns. Hearing this, our protagonist agreed for now, but he might change his mind later. Night soon arrived, and he discovered that, even though he had only hunted a few rabbits during the day, his level had unexpectedly jumped to 8. Upon closer inspection, he found an gods had actually granted him another cheat skill, a 100x multiplier to his experience gain rate. If the kingdom found out, he wouldn't just be under surveillance, he might even end up on the guillotine. The next day, the teachers took him to the Adventurers Guild, planning to take on some high-difficulty subjugation quests. But just then, a thug with a mohawk stepped in front of them, picking a fight and insisting on taking Genie out for a drink. His lackeys knew exactly what their boss was up to, however. Faced with this scene, our protagonist wasn't about to hold back. He stepped up and delivered a massive slap, sending Mohawk rolling on the ground in pain. Refusing to back down, the thug scrambled back to his feet, ready to teach this little brat a lesson, only to be tripped and sent face first into the dirt again. At this point, Mohawk decided to fight dirty. The moment he grabbed his weapon, he swung it right at the boy, but our protagonist simply dodged back and forth through the sword's afterimages. He even showed off a blade catch move, stopping the sword with his bare hands. And happiness! Another tattoo stimulate. Could that be soon, although I'm gonna touch him? Hey, I see, hey. That's impressive. With the trouble resolved, the trio grew much closer to one another. 2.5 years flew by in the blink of an eye, and it was finally time to say goodbye. Since he had heard before that Genie wanted a magic bag, before they part ways, he decides to give them a farewell gift. So he ventures deep into the forest in search of materials. However, he never imagined that his casual strike would look like an act of terror to the soldiers. Thinking a monster horde was sieging the city, the guard rang the alarm bell to warn everyone. The Lord, the protagonist's father, immediately led his soldiers out under the cover of night to slay the beast. Clearly our protagonist hasn't realized the gravity of the situation yet. Once his gathering was done, he simply teleported back home. When the Lord reached the site, he was stunned by the massive crater left behind. However, seeing the towel left in the pit, he knew instantly who the culprit was. In the blink of an eye, the day of their departure arrived. The protagonist presented Genie and Taimai with 2 magic bags as gifts, explaining that the red bag was made from a blood ogre, while the green one was crafted from an earth dragon. Hearing this, the two were absolutely floored. After all, those are monsters that require an A rank adventurer party just to stand a chance of defeating. Their own ranks were only D rank. Even that arrogant punk from before was only C rank. But what shocked them even more was when he revealed that these bags could hold his family's entire mansion. At this point, Guinea was practically incoherent. The high-end magic bag he wanted to buy could only hold a carriage at most. This meant these bags were nothing short of national treasure class items. Carrying them around would surely make them targets for every greedy soul out there. However, he told them not to worry, as he had enchanted them so that for anyone other than the 3 of them, the bags would retain their full massive weight. Hearing this, the two found it even more absurd, because even National Treasure level couldn't describe it anymore. But he insisted they accept it after all. Over the past 2.5 years, his teachers had taught him so much. However, before he could even finish his sentence, Genie and Taimei both gave him a sweet kiss, leaving him blushing as red as a steaming kettle. After expressing his gratitude, the 2 teachers, framed by the sunset, slowly walked off into the distance. However, once he returned home, next day arrived in a flash as the young son of a counter. Traveling to the royal capital for his debut became an essential event. However, as luck would have it, the unexpected occurred. Using magic, he detected a battle occurring about 2 miles ahead. A few humans were being besieged by dozens of monsters. Although his father immediately ordered some soldiers to provide backup, he realized they wouldn't make it in time at this rate. So, under his parents' astonished gazes, he cast a speed-enhancing spell. Moving like the wind, he dashed toward the scene, leaving the soldiers behind completely bewildered. Meanwhile, a group of knights was desperately defending a carriage. Just in the nick of time, he finally arrived. In the blink of an eye, he had wiped out most of the monsters. Even the seemingly formidable beast was reduced to ashes by his flaming sword. As he prepared to assess the situation, the backup soldiers finally arrived. However, seeing the young master already there left them dumbfounded. Our hero didn't bother explaining himself, as the priority was using magic to heal the wounded soldiers. Before long, his father arrived on the scene. However, the moment he saw the young ladies in the carriage, he completely lost his cool, as one was the king's daughter, and the other was the daughter of a duke. Though physically unharmed, they were still quite shaken by the ordeal. So after getting their consent, our hero cast a calming spell on them. The magic worked instantly, and the girls' anxiety and exhaustion vanished. They became so relaxed, they were practically ready to perform. Because of this, the 2 girls became completely attached to him. Upon learning that they were all heading to the same destination, they insisted on sharing a carriage with him no matter what. Our hero tried to decline at first, but given their noble status, he really had no choice. His father stood by, looking absolutely shell-shocked. However, that was only the beginning. Despite the spacious carriage, the 2 girls sat pressed tightly against him. Fortunately, they soon reached a rest stop. But unfortunately, the girls insisted that he spend the night with them. This put his father in a very awkward spot, since they couldn't win the argument. Our hero was forced to agree.
It's true. Oh my god. Just sign on the line.
Incredible. However, he never could have imagined that, to get even closer to him, the 2 girls decided to push 3 beds together. On one side was the princess, and on the other, the duke's daughter. Our hero knew he wouldn't be getting any sleep tonight. It turned out exactly as he had expected. After enduring another 2.5 days of this torture, our hero and his party finally arrived at the royal capital. But just as he tried to seize the chance to slip away, a knight stopped him, stating that he was summoned for an audience with his majesty. Kane was left completely bewildered. It turned out that the news of his heroic rescue had already reached the king's ears. More importantly, among the 50+ monsters he wiped out, there was even a high-ranking orc general among them. Consequently, the king not only bestowed the title of baron upon him, but also granted him several gold coins and a private mansion. The crowd immediately broke into a flurry of whispers. Just then, a nobleman stepped forward from the crowd to protest. After all, being granted a title at the age of 10 was unheard of in this kingdom, but the king's mind was made up, leaving the nobleman no choice but to back down. Afterward, the king sought out Kane and his group in private. It turned out he wanted to speak to them simply as a father, to express his personal gratitude for saving the princess. Joining him was the purple-haired man next to him, the duke and father of the other girl. Confronted by such high-ranking gratitude, Kane was at a total loss. However, the real shock was still to come. They both seem to like you very much. So that was their real point, and Kane knew exactly why this was happening. What had gotten out about them holding hands in a carriage, and the fact that the three of them had shared a bed was now exposed. In this culture, it meant neither girl could ever marry anyone else. Faced with this inescapable situation, Kane tried to signal his father with his eyes, pleading for help, but his father simply chose to ignore him. With no other choice, Kane could only agree, much to the delight of the two girls. The next day, the gods suddenly reached out to him. Since this world is severely lacking in entertainment, the gods hoped he could use his knowledge from his past life to create some games. For our protagonist, this was a task he could do in his sleep. Upon his return, he immediately rushed to the Chamber of Commerce and shared his ideas with the Guildmaster. Once he understood the rules and gameplay of Othello, the Guildmaster decisively accepted the commission, and Kane asked him to produce a prototype first. With that, he pulled a gold coin out of his pocket. Guildmaster was stunned, but Kane assured him that money was no object. It should all be considered as an initial investment. To his surprise, however, the Guildmaster finished the prototype in just 2.5 days. After testing it out for around the guild, Master was more convinced than ever that it would be a hit and wanted to start mass production immediately. Kane agreed, but suggested creating both luxury versions for nobles and affordable ones for commoners, ensuring the needs of all classes were met so that everyone could enjoy the fun of the game. The Guildmaster was impressed, but he worried that the cost of mass production would be quite high. In response, Kane slammed 5 gold coins onto the table, and just like that, the funding issue was perfectly resolved. Next was the patent by offering the product to the god of commerce. No one would be able to replicate the design for 3 years. With a flash of golden light, the product vanished from before their very eyes. Kane seemed to realize something. Could it be that the gods, people are already playing it, and everything is going exactly as he expected? Next, Kane asked the shopkeeper to prepare a deluxe version of the game, as he planned to present it to the royal family as a gift for his debut party. This nearly gave the poor shopkeeper another heart attack, but with Kane's encouragement, the man felt truly honored by the task. 2.5 days later at the debut party, Kane was wandering aimlessly through the hall. Suddenly, a nobleman nearby caught his attention. It was that same jerk who had opposed his knighthood earlier, and one look at the 3 kids beside him was enough to know they were the man's son and his 2 lackeys. However, Kane didn't care, for he had spotted his petite and adorable fiancée. She looked so stunningly beautiful that he couldn't help but shower her with compliments. Cough, cough, Impressive now, following protocol, everyone must have an audience with the king, however. When it was Kane's turn, he started flirting with the princess right in front of his majesty. Incredible guts. Fortunately, Kane was quick-witted enough to immediately present the entertainment product he developed, successfully changing the subject. The king found it intriguing, but since this wasn't the time for games, he told Kane he'd hear the details later, along with some man-to-man talk. After the audience, Kane's father was utterly shell-shocked. It's one thing to gain 2 fiancées at the age of 10, but he's even started a business selling entertainment games. He urged Kane to act more like a normal child and spend more time with his peers. That his parents left, and Kane admitted there was some truth to it. Doing all this at age 10 really is a bit over the top. Just then, his fiancée approached, since the princess was busy socializing. He finally had a chance for someone on one time. However, just as the 2 of them were getting cozy, 3 little brats interrupted them. The chubby one in the middle thought his status alone would make the lady fall for him. But as it turned out, he was dead wrong. After getting the cold shoulder, the brat took out his frustration on our protagonist, challenging him to a duel on the spot. But his fiancée only clung to him tighter. This didn't just incense the chubby kid, his 2 lackeys couldn't stand it either. He insisted on using magic to teach the protagonist a lesson.
You are the one for me. He got a dear me, yeah. You know, Mario could have Coco, you need to say yummy, yummy. You need to say ta-ta. You need to say struggle. I got you up. Come on, bro. That's epic. Then the other brat next to him couldn't hold back any longer either.
So, he decided to have a go at it as well. But the result was predictable. Just as they were about to try for a third time, his fiancée finally lost her patience and revealed that the protagonist was a baron, mentioning that he had also soloed over 30 monsters. Hearing this, the three brats were instantly terrified and scurried away in shame. His fiancée guessed that he was just playing dumb to show them up and make them look like fools, so she used it as leverage to blackmail him into a date. Otherwise, she threatened to tell the princess all about it. And just then, his main fiancée arrived on the scene. Upon hearing about their date, her cheeks puffed out in a jealous pout. After all, she also wanted to spend some quality time with him.
How cute. Kia. Oh my god. Here is another blessing from above.
The next day, Cain arrived at the grand mansion bestowed upon him by the king. Although the house had been abandoned for 2.5 years, Cain's overpowered magic, it took only 2.5 seconds for the cluttered rooms to become spotless, and even the broken furniture was fully restored. This didn't just leave the cleaning maids dumbfounded. Even his family was completely shocked by what they saw. However, his father felt that something was still missing. The artworks and decorations expected of a noble household. For instance, sets of armor or various statues. Hearing this, Cain immediately understood. He then promptly released the taxidermy specimen of the red dragon. The maids were instantly paralyzed with fear at the sight of it. Even his father was pale with shock. After all, this is a calamity-class magical beast. Even a party of a rank adventurers might not survive a fight with it. Little did they know, Cain had already taken it down 2.5 years ago. Just as his father was starting to calm down, his mother's screams suddenly echoed from the bathroom.
What on earth is this? Wait, where is this water coming from? Feels so strange. I've never seen anything like it.
Yo ho ho. Oh, Master Cain is so up. Be so us.
Then his father told Cain that according to tradition, whenever a noble acquires a new residence, they must host a banquet and invite other nobles to visit. Hearing this, our hero's head was spinning. Fortunately, the butler had already prepared the guest list in advance. The next step was to prepare the gifts and the menu. And ceramic tableware is the standard in this world. The protagonist decided to craft some exquisite patterned glassware. As for the food, he decided to introduce his hamburger recipe. For drinks, he went with sparkling wine. As for the taste, well, the maid's expression said it all. 2.5 days later, the banquet began, and the Count soon arrived, along with the protagonist's young fiancée. Despite the butler's warning, seeing the red dragon specimen in person still left them both completely stunned. With the nobles gathered, the protagonist prepared to give his speech and raised his glass in a toast to everyone present. As expected, in the very next moment, everyone was instantly captivated by the flavor of the sparkling wine. The Duke fell in love with the glass at first sight, marveling at how it looked like a literal jewelry box. When he heard they would be given away for free, the Duke was over the moon. He didn't even need to taste the food to know it would be exceptional. Judging by the ecstatic looks on the two ladies' faces, the king sooner arrived with his family as well. As soon as he sat down, he was drawn to the glassware. After taking a sip, he was blown away the sensation of the bubbles dancing in his mouth. Was a first for him. Then he tried our hero's secret recipe sliders. With every bite, his taste buds felt like they were dancing. Gave it an 8.4 out of 10, bitterly noting that the protagonist himself makes up the other 1 6. Even his main fiancée's smile was filled with the taste of love. At this moment, the queen approached her face, blushing with embarrassment, as she had discovered that the toilet actually sprays water before Cain could even explain. She demanded that one be installed in the royal palace immediately.
Oh, you are so deep.
Even the king was speechless at this. He couldn't believe such a wonderful thing hadn't been mentioned to him, so he ordered the protagonist to install one for him right away as well. Later, in front of all the gathered nobles, King generously gave the highest praise for the hospitality shown. Just then, that troublesome noble who had opposed his knighthood also showed up. He not only ridiculed the mansion for being small, but even insulted it by calling it a kennel. The protagonist didn't bother to respond. Instead, he quickly held back his butler, who wanted to step in. Sure enough, the moment he stepped inside, he was scared witless by the calamity-class red dragon. However, even after the explanation, the man didn't tone down his behavior. Instead, he flaunted his status as a marquis, pointing fingers at the other guests, calling them all third-rate nobles. Words instantly drew glares from the other nobles. After tasting the sparkling wine, although he was secretly delighted, he still stubbornly refused to admit how good it was. He reacted the same way to the hamburgers.
Alright then.
This immediately irritated the protagonist, but the butler reminded him that the man was still a marquis, and causing a scene would be difficult to handle. Saying the point, the protagonist came up with a clever plan and presented the man with 2 gift sets. The marquis was clearly pleased, but then he demanded that the protagonist prepare 100 sets and the recipes for tonight's banquet dishes. While declining the offer, he used magic to locate the king. Then he suddenly changed his tune, saying he could offer the greatest thing to the kingdom.
Seeing this, the Marquis was left completely stunned, dumbfounded, and reprimanded by the king. He beat a hasty retreat in disgrace.
Meanwhile, his clever fiancée had already seen through it all. She realized it was a trap he had deliberately set.
No, I can't go into your office for this.
My head, I'm coming up.
The next day, he looked for a place to store his monster materials. Little did he know the display would leave the vice-captain utterly speechless. Not only were there powerful or rank monsters, but even Calamity Class S rank magical beasts were among them. Staring at the 2.5-ton pile of monster carcasses, the vice-captain couldn't help but question who he really was, wondering if he was a hero or an apostle of the gods. Startled by the question, the boy was caught off guard. After insisting he was just an ordinary kid, he tried to make a quick getaway. However, the vice-captain grabbed him before he could slip away. He wanted him to spar with the knights and meet the captain. With no other choice, he agreed. Soon they arrived at the training grounds. Though the soldiers had heard of his heroic exploits, they still saw him as just a kid and doubted his true strength. So the veteran soldier in the first round decided to give him a handicap, letting him have the first move. He didn't hesitate to take the offer.
This is hard.
Holy cow, he realized he had totally overdone it. He was ready to slip away the next second, but the vice-captain got all excited and suggested that he take on everyone at once. However, at the moment the battle was about to begin, an elven girl suddenly leaped down from the sky. She was not only the captain of the knights, but also a powerhouse holding the title of Sword Saint. She first held the boy and comforted him for a moment, before immediately pinning the blame for bullying a child on the vice-captain. However, upon learning he was the hero who single-handedly wiped out 30 Orchies, the captain's attitude shifted instantly. She insisted on having a spar with him no matter what. The boy was speechless before he could even agree or refuse. The captain struck first. When they saw the two fighting on equal terms, the surrounding soldiers all had looks of utter disbelief. The most absurd part was yet to come, because the captain actually ended up losing to this little kid. It was at that moment that the captain made a shocking decision. She decided to marry him. Now, not only were the soldiers dumbfounded, but even our hero was scared stiff. After all, he's only 10, not to mention they only just met today. However, the captain told him not to worry. As an elf, she could live up to 300 years, though her appearance wouldn't change for quite some time. Even so, the boy was still troubled, since this wasn't a decision he could make on his own. The captain thought that made some sense, so she planned to ask the king to arrange the marriage. This declaration scared the living daylights out of him. Once again, if the king finds out he's gained yet another fiancée, won't he be in for another lecture? However, it's no longer up to him, because the next moment, the protagonist is brought before the king. Upon hearing the commander's request, the king is completely dumbfounded. Hoping to dissuade her, the king mentions to the McWa that he's already engaged to the princess and the duke's daughter. But instead of giving up, the commander actually sees him as a genius recognized by both the king and the duke. If anything, her desire to marry him only grows stronger. The king, now with a massive headache, has no choice but to agree for now, on the condition that he writes a letter to get his father's consent. The commander says it's no problem and drags the MC to the arena to write the letter. The king is utterly speechless. He never would have imagined that the nation's strongest sword saint could lose to a 10-year-old child. At that moment, the vice commander steps forward and mentions that when they asked if the MC was a hero or an apostle of God, his expression seemed somewhat unusual. Hearing this, the king also begins to doubt the MC's true identity. An old man nearby suggests a way to put him to the test by using a legendary Earth-class magic tome. Fast forward 2.5 days later, the vice commander notices that the MC is physically and mentally exhausted. It turns out that since that day, the MC hasn't stopped dating for a second, and the commander won't let him go until she's completely drained his stamina. Furthermore, the Sword Saint title has appeared on his status panel at some point. Just then, the protagonist heard the captain calling out to him again. As he tried to slip away, he was unexpectedly caught by the vice captain. Immediately after he was brought before the king, the protagonist thought he was in trouble once again, but the old man handed him an Earth-tier magic book. What's more, it was written by the very first king. He was instantly intrigued, but he never could have imagined that no one else but him could understand its contents, because the text inside turned out to be Japanese. He realized then that the cat was out of the bag. It seemed the first king was a reincarnated person just like himself. Faced with the king's questioning, He felt he could no longer keep it a secret, so he revealed that he possessed memories of a previous life. This revelation sent shockwaves through everyone present. His father in particular began to doubt if this was truly his son. To this, the protagonist insisted that his identity was undeniable, because that is exactly what the gods told him during his baptism at age 5. As soon as he finished speaking, he nearly floored everyone again as he opened his status panel. He not only displayed the title Apostle of the Gods, but all 7 of his divine protections were at level 10. Keep in mind, normal people only reach level 5 at most, and usually only receive a single blessing. The king was utterly dumbfounded because before this title, everyone in the world must bow to him, the king included. However, the protagonist had no desire for such a life, simply wanted to live as a normal person, just as before. So he asked everyone present to help keep his secret. The king agreed, but in the next breath, he played a little joke on him. "I'll take him for myself." Just then, the Knight Commander burst in once again, clutching a marriage permit sent by her father. At this point, she was eager to marry the protagonist right then and there. But before anyone could react, he was dragged off by her once more for sparring practice. It didn't take long for the news of their marriage to reach the ears of the princess and the duke's daughter. The protagonist could only keep apologizing. The duke's daughter didn't seem to mind, while the princess merely issued a stern warning. This kid is seriously impressive. While his peers are still playing in the mud, he already has 3 fiancées, one of whom is a beautiful elf knight commander. Whenever he tries to study, the 2 girls fight over his attention, and when he finally has some free time for a date, the commander drags him off for sword training to bond. Eventually, the protagonist couldn't take this exhausting lifestyle anymore, so he changed his clothes and headed to the Adventurers Guild. As it turns out, today is his 12th birthday, which is also the minimum age to register as an adventurer. After completing the registration process, he finally got his wish. He officially became an adventurer, though his starting rank was only G level. He didn't mind at all. However, just as the guild receptionist was encouraging him, 3 punks suddenly showed up nearby to pick a fight. This cliché routine left the protagonist completely speechless. The brute leading them tried to strike first, but he somehow ended up tripping himself over with a clumsy kick. His 2 lackeys were furious upon seeing this. Unfortunately, they were no match for our protagonist. Just as the brute threw sportsmanship aside and tried to draw his sword, suddenly, a formidable-looking red-haired man approached. The brute naturally recognized who he was, and quickly fled with his 2 lackeys. After expressing his gratitude, the redhead suggested grabbing a drink together. As he noticed the protagonist's movements showed real skill, the protagonist didn't refuse, seeing that the man was a rank adventurer. He was incredibly envious. The redhead said it was nothing special, since there are still S rank and SSS rank above him. Just as they were chatting away, the redhead's wife suddenly showed up. Since they were on a mission, they took their leave. The protagonist then prepared to take on a quest himself. Just then, he spotted a goblin subjugation quest in the corner. The reward had no upper limit, and was based on the number of kills. This made him absolutely thrilled. However, before he could even take a few steps, Captain suddenly came running towards him and gave him a big hug. Upon hearing that the protagonist was going on a quest, the captain decisively dumped her work on the vice captain. After all, nothing in the world is more important than her husband. The protagonist tried to slip away but was caught by her and dragged straight into the forest of the quest. Then, using detection magic, he quickly located the goblins, but when they arrived, they found that there were injured villagers at the scene. The 2 split the duties. The protagonist handled the healing, while the captain went on the offensive. In just a flash, the 3 goblins were slain by her blade. Just as the captain thought the battle was over, little did she know, another large swarm of goblins appears ahead. Saying this, our protagonist steps up as a god-tier healer and casts some incredibly powerful buffs on the commander.
Is this okay? You can go for the Lord. Hey, you're making it? I'll tell you then. Wait a second. It's time to show them what we're worth. Watch me fly, come on, dude.
Impressive. However, right after wiping out the goblins, a massive pack of lizardmen suddenly blocks their path. The protagonist tells the commander to evacuate the wounded while he takes charge of both, covering the rear. In an instant, a massive iceberg surges up behind them, a spectacle that leaves the villagers utterly terrified. Before long, the protagonist returns to the Adventurers Guild, but when the staff hears he defeated 30 lizardmen all by himself, the receptionist is completely dumbfounded. After all, a feat of that difficulty is strictly C-rank territory. The matter is reported to the Guildmaster's chief clerk, but unexpectedly the clerk flies into a blind rage. He not only accuses the protagonist of cheating, even threatens to revoke his adventurer's registration card. Hearing this, the protagonist's heart sinks. Luckily, the Guildmaster chooses that moment to step in. After getting the full story, the Guildmaster recognizes the protagonist's true identity at a glance. However, he doesn't expose him immediately. Instead, he calls in his younger sister, who was waiting at the door. She learns that the kid before her is not only the hero who saved the princess, and since he's also the fiancé of the kingdom's strongest knight commander, the supervisor immediately fell to his knees, breaking into a cold sweat. Luckily, Kane didn't press the matter, and the guildmaster, to save time, decided to immediately raise his adventurer rank to rank C. However, the commander felt that wasn't enough. After all, her husband had already defeated a Calamity-class red dragon over 2 years ago. Not to mention his power far surpasses her own. Hearing this, the receptionist and the supervisor were completely stunned. After all, this means he is already the strongest in the kingdom. Upon hearing this, the guildmaster decided to promote him directly to rank A. This would make it easier for the guild to issue specific requests to him later. Naturally, Kane didn't refuse, so the supervisor and the receptionist hurried off to process the paperwork. Meanwhile, this scene was being observed by the 7 gods. The god of magic felt that Kane's abilities were truly absurd, but the god of creation believed he needed to become even stronger, because the seal on the evil god, Aaron, is about to break. These words immediately caused a massive stir among the gods. This means the world is about to face another moment of crisis. So the gods proposed finding him a mentor. It just so happens that there's someone lounging at home with nothing to do. However, Kane was completely unaware of all this, as he was too busy enjoying the excitement of getting his gold card. The next day arrived in a flash. The 2 girls thought they'd finally have time to date him, but they didn't expect what happened next. This kid is absolutely incredible. The teacher just asked him to cast some magic to test his strength, but Kane took it to a whole new level. Even though he only used 1,000th of his power, he still blasted the school walls into smithereens. Not only were the other candidates left speechless, but even the examiner was completely baffled. After telling everyone to head to the next testing site, the teacher rushed to check if any unlucky students had been caught in a blast. Our hero felt a bit sheepish about the whole thing. He decided to keep a low profile, but unexpected events kept piling up. It turned out the swordsmanship examiner was an A-rank adventurer from the guild, and that red-haired guy he met earlier was among them. The red-haired guy was shocked to see our hero there, but the next second he volunteered to be his sparring partner. The protagonist wanted to decline, but the examiner wouldn't hear him, and so the duel between the two began. Since his opponent was a top-tier adventurer, our hero didn't hold back. He immediately activated physical enhancement and charged forward. Saying how powerful his opponent was, the red-haired guy decided to get serious. The other candidates watching were completely lost, because they couldn't keep up with their movements at all. Sensing that our hero's strength even surpassed that of the other examiners, the red-haired guy ramped up his offensive and even used physical enhancement, just like our hero. Our hero was genuinely impressed. It's a good thing he has god-tier cheats, because if it were any other candidate, they'd probably end up with broken bones on the spot. The teacher on the sidelines couldn't watch any longer and immediately called a halt. After all, if they kept fighting like this, the other candidates would be traumatized for life. The red-haired guy agreed, but more importantly, in fact, he was looking forward to teaming up with him to slay monsters in the future. With that, the exams finally concluded. However, the next day, the king suddenly summoned our hero, demanding to know why he had to show off so much during yesterday's exam. To this, he quickly explained that it was only because the teacher said the school was protected by a barrier. Thinking there was no need to worry, he only used the most basic magic, yet the walls still ended up being obliterated. He used super or calamity class magic instead. The teacher and the other candidates would likely be long gone. The king was instantly stunned, but what baffled him most was that the princess and the duke's daughter both claimed they never saw him there. It was then that he realized he had actually gone to the wrong place. Since the school has separate entrances for nobles and commoners, he had accidentally used the commoner's entrance. King was speechless. If he's getting lost before even entering the school, heaven knows what kind of trouble he'll cause after he's married. All he could do was apologize profusely for the mix-up. In the blink of an eye, the day for the results came. Unsurprisingly, he ranked first in the entire school. On the day of the entrance ceremony, his 2 fiancées finally had the chance to meet up with him. He looked incredibly dashing in his school uniform, immediately winning unanimous praise from both girls. However, the other boys behind them were none too pleased. Next was the freshman speech. As the top student of the school, there was naturally no escaping it. Fortunately, thanks to his memories from his previous life, delivering a formal speech was as easy as pie for him. However, as luck would have it, something unexpected occurred no one could have predicted. Even the king showed up, as this year's student body features some legendary talents. He came to keep them in check, specifically to tell the MC to keep a low profile. Hearing this, the MC broke out in a cold sweat, and the second-hand embarrassment was so intense that even his parents were cringing. Next was course selection. Even the MC's assigned seat was ridiculously high profile. Luckily, the teacher didn't mind after some careful consideration. The MC picked all combat-related subjects while the princess chose internal affairs, since she plans to manage their territory alongside him in the future. The duke's daughter opted for the business department for much the same reason: build a better life together with the McVie. However, during the break after class, the MC spotted 3 brats bullying a cat girl, simply because she was a commoner who had made it into class 1. When he heard them trying to force her to drop out, the MC was instantly incensed. He gave the trio a piece of his mind, but unexpectedly, the chubby kid got cocky and threatened to tell his father on them, vowing to destroy the commoner's home. This, his 2 fiancées couldn't just stand by anymore. After all, when it comes to family status, the princess wins hands down. Hearing that the 3 brats dropped to their knees instantly, after apologizing to the cat girl, they scurried off in shame. The cat girl quickly expressed her gratitude to the McVie, but he told her it was no big deal and to seek him out if she ever needed help. But as luck would have it, his 2 girls overheard everything. Left with no choice, the MC had to go along with them. However, just as the 3 of them were chatting happily, voice suddenly echoed in the Messi's ears, and it seemed he was the only one who could hear it. And this person was the very master the gods had chosen for him. Following the instructions, our protagonist arrived at the library doors. To his surprise, the moment he stepped inside, he found himself in another dimension. His body was then involuntarily teleported further into the room. Witnessing this, he was instantly dumbfounded, all because coffee of all things had appeared in this other world. He asked the mysterious figure who they were, but the mysterious man was in no rush to answer. Instead, he called out our hero's name from his previous life.
Oh.
This kid is seriously overpowered, having been reincarnated with the divine protections and blessings of 7 gods. At just 10 years old, he has already become the strongest in the kingdom. However, the gods feel he still has room to grow by another 5 times, so they assigned him an even more legendary master. Not only does this person also hail from Earth, but he was also the first king of this isekai world. He was even the one responsible for sealing away the evil god who plagued the world 300 years ago. But unfortunately, the seal has recently begun to weaken. Since the master has long since become a god in another realm, he cannot directly intervene. Thus, the mission to save the world falls squarely on our protagonist's shoulders. Coincidentally, the evil god's business is also tied to his previous life. Before he could ask for details in the blink of an eye, he was whisked away to the middle of the ocean. The master then stated that only after enduring this harsh training and reaching level 600 would he reveal everything the protagonist wanted to know. Hearing this absurd demand, our hero was completely shell-shocked. He's only level 300 right now, and if he stays away for too long, his family will surely worry that something has happened to him. However, his master had already taken that into account, explained that a year here is equivalent to only 1 day in the outside world. With that, he headed back to enjoy his tea. With no other choice, our hero had to bite the bullet and charge into the forest. But to his surprise, within just 2.5 hours, dozens of magical beasts had swarmed him. Forget resting, he didn't even have time to sleep. He managed to endure this relentless onslaught for 2.5 months. Before long, he finally reached his physical limit. Just then, the faint cry of an animal in distress echoed from the distance. Drawing closer, he discovered it was an adorable little wolf cub. His first instinct, however, was to put it out of its misery. But just as he was about to strike, memories of his past life's heroic deeds flashed through his mind. Snapping back to reality, he realized he almost lost his most precious trait, the compassion to protect others and the kindness of the soul. So he did not hesitate to exhaust every last drop of his mana to fully heal the little wolf the very next second. He collapsed from sheer exhaustion. When he finally woke up, he found he was not only alive, but had actually been saved by the little creature. Saying that the cub was alone just like him, he decided they should train together, naming him Haku. Haku's companionship gave him the strength and resolve to persevere. In this way, 4 years passed in the blink of an eye. Our hero finally made his way back to the cabin where it all began. His master was immensely proud of his progress, but more than that, it was the little wolf by his side that truly caught his eye. He recognized it immediately as a Fenrir, a legendary divine beast. Then, at his master's suggestion, he formed a familiar contract with Haku. This way, he could summon him whenever he needed. He thought his training was finally over, but to his surprise, his master summoned another man and told him he couldn't go home until he defeated Dolan. Even though he had already reached level 600, he was still no match for the man just 1 round. He was knocked out cold. When he woke up, he found himself himself in Dolan's home, where Dolan's wife had already prepared a feast. He also noticed a baby dragon resting under the stairs. Saying this, Haku was clearly not pleased. Fortunately, the fit of jealousy didn't last long, because it was finally time to enjoy a delicious meal. You see, he had been surviving in the wild for the past 4 years. It had been a long time since he'd had a proper home-cooked meal. Just like that, another 2.5 months passed. He could finally hold his own in a fight against Dolan, progressing from being carried back to walking home on his own. Still, he felt his progress was far too slow. As it turned out, after he passed his first trial, his master had revealed the truth about his origins. Originally, there were 8 gods in this world. The evil god was actually the god of games in charge of entertainment. He used his divine domain to force innocent people into games of death. For this, he was cast out of the divine realm. Back then, his master had been summoned from Earth, along with his parents, although his master ultimately succeeded in sealing the evil god. But it's a precious opportunity his parents sacrificed their lives for, and at this very moment, he finally breaks through his limits. Whoa! That was epic. After defeating Dolan, his training has officially come to an end. Before leaving, he visits his parents' graves to pay his respects, and his master tells him that they were always thinking of him. Hearing this, he finally breaks down. Just then, his master takes out some cookies just like before. He understands the gesture instantly. This time, he snatches the cookies away effortlessly. His master is pleased, and he prepares to head home. But first, he needs to return to his original appearance. His master then suggests taking Haku with him, as well as the little wyvern from Dolan's family. After forming a contract with them, he activates teleportation magic. But his master nearly forgot to give him a sword for the old king. He accepts, and in the next second he's back home. The maid bursts into tears the moment she sees him, and his 2 fiancées are finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. They even learned how to bake cookies while he was away. Saying this, he is moved to tears. But this moment of warmth is short-lived.
Whose is this? Who made this mud?
The next day, the king summons him. Upon learning his master is not only a creator god from another world, but also the founding king from 300 years ago. The current king is completely shell-shocked. After all, logically that person should have been dead and gone ages ago. But when the lead pulled out the personal sword used by the first king, the old king was finally convinced of everything. Meanwhile, the earl reminded him that the Adventurers Guild had sent several letters during his absence. If he didn't complete a quest soon, his guild card would be revoked. Dumbfounded by the news, he rushed to the guild and accepted a bandit subjugation quest using flight magic. He quickly located the bandits' hideout. To his surprise, the people being surrounded were all old acquaintances. 2 women before him were his former tutors from when he was 5. Zayangini Jord, however, instantly sent him into a rage. After casting a healing spell, he ignored the bandits' contemptuous sneers. He immediately drew the legendary sword of the first king. With effortless ease, he knocked all the bandits unconscious in an instant. Saying this, although Genie and Taimai knew how strong he was, they were still utterly shocked by his display of power. But the real shocker was yet to come when she learned that he was now a high-rank adventurer and had even been granted a title by the king. Genie lost her composure. He insisted on giving him an affectionate, smothering hug. Overwhelmed by her enthusiasm, he made an excuse about turning in the quest and bolted back to the guild, saying that he had completed the commission in just 2.5 minutes. The receptionist was completely stunned. After all, she had never seen a man finish a job so quickly. Just then, the long-lost chicken brother and his 2 lackeys showed up to harass Genie and Taimai once again. However, the moment he spotted our protagonist, the 3 of them were instantly paralyzed with fear. After all, a few years ago, they had been taught a lesson by this very brat. Just thinking about it made their backsides ache all over again. However, the sudden appearance of Red Hair and his wife unexpectedly saved their skins. Once he learned the whole story, Red Hair was completely stunned, because the person the protagonist saved turned out to be his own sister. Faced with such an incredible coincidence, Red Hair immediately suggested a drink to celebrate her. During the drinks, Red Hair was shocked to discover that the protagonist's adventurer rank had already reached rank A. When Red Hair's wife saw the dragon skin bags the 2 girls had, she was green with envy and begged him to help her get one too. With no other choice, the protagonist reluctantly agreed. The next moment, the wife drifted off into a drunken slumber. Red Hair wasn't angry about it, of course, since he knew his wife was just being a messy drunk. Next day, just as the protagonist was heading to class, he found himself blacklisted by every single teacher. The reason: he was simply too overpowered, resulting in a ban on him using magic on campus. Furthermore, he was granted automatic credits for all those courses. The 4 people nearby noticed what was happening, mistakenly thinking he was being ostracized, so they decided to lend him a hand. They chose the swordsmanship class for their opportunity. According to their plan, they would first showcase their own skills, before letting the protagonist take the stage to show off, ensuring he would become the hero of the class. However, while the dream was beautiful, reality was harsh. Just as it was finally our protagonist's turn, class ended. The bell rang unexpectedly, forcing the duel to a sudden halt. He was beyond frustrated But the worst was yet to come. Because of the massive hole he had previously blown in the school, the repairs alone cost a staggering 790 gold, leaving the school's budget completely drained. As a result, they could no longer afford to hire adventurers as guest lecturers. Devastated by the news, he decided to vent his pent-up rage. He headed to the monster forest under the cover of night. Even a calamity-class dragon was instantly obliterated. He even unleashed such powerful fire magic that the local garrison mistook the explosion for the resurrection of the Demon King. But by the time the Lord arrived at the scene, he found nothing but a massive crater with his own son's handkerchief lying right in the middle of it. This kid is truly on a whole different level. While his peers were summoning mere mice, birds, and tiny rabbits, even the more talented students could only manage to summon a 2-5-meter tall husky. If a summoned beast deems its master a noob, it will simply leave on its own. However, our protagonist is a different story entirely. Instead of a magical beast, he somehow summoned the actual Demon King of this world. Realizing things had gone south, he quickly used a flash spell to blind everyone and cover his tracks. Demon King himself was left utterly bewildered by the situation. He never expected his summoner to be a mere human child. He cast a sharp, piercing gaze at the boy, and our hero realized his status panel was being peeked at. But just as he was weighing the option of fighting,
I can't do this. There's no way I can win this. Absolutely legendary. Despite having no such intention initially, he ended up forming a contract with the Demon King.
After all, if we stay here any longer, everyone else will be truly blinded by the light. Once the magic circle faded, the teacher was left in a state of utter shock, having caught the words Demon King just moments before. Saying this, he hurried to explain that the being was merely a demon, and that no contract had been signed. The teacher didn't press the matter further, but just as he thought he'd successfully bluffed his way out, word of the incident reached the king anyway. Under his father-in-law's persistent interrogation, he finally came clean. The king was absolutely stunned after all. If a Demon King were to go on a rampage, the entire capital would be reduced to ashes in an instant. All he could do was keep apologizing, as he hadn't expected his mana to be drained so relentlessly upon injection. Hearing this, a thought suddenly occurred to the king, to swearing the teacher to secrecy regarding what he'd witnessed. The king prepared to show everyone his absurd status panel. Incredible, everyone present was completely shell-shocked by what they saw, with even the king fearing that he might inadvertently destroy the nation. After all, in the king's eyes, he had already become the strongest being in the world. He could only sigh in exasperation at their reaction. All he wanted was for everyone to treat him just like they always had. The king agreed, but on one condition. He must accept an immediate promotion to the rank of Viscount. He would be granted a town to rule, if he managed it well. Could officially become the king's son-in-law. After all, if a man cannot even protect a single town, how could he possibly have the capacity to protect an entire kingdom? However, a mere 2.5 days later, he received some troubling news from his butler. Signs of a monster outbreak have appeared in the forest near his hometown, causing many residents to flee their homes, and even adventurers are suffering heavy casualties. After hearing this, the protagonist rushes to the depths of the forest with his 2 divine beasts to investigate. Though he feels like he's constantly being watched, he can't seem to pinpoint the source, so he decides to summon the Demon King. After a quick briefing, the Demon King also senses an ominous presence lurking in the forest's deepest reaches. Moreover, the path is crawling with numerous high-level monsters, seeking more than just the protagonist's intel. The Demon King summons a subordinate specialized in scouting. Upon seeing the extraordinary human standing behind the Demon King, the old man realizes this is no ordinary individual. He learns the protagonist is an apostle of the gods. The old man drops to his knees instantly. He then immediately uses his ability to scout the area. Suddenly, a horde of SSS-rank magical beasts appears in the forest. The protagonist takes to the sky to strike in the blink of an eye. He makes quick work of the monsters, one by one. Leaving the 2 on standby in the forest, the protagonist prepares to head back to the city to alert everyone. Meanwhile, the guild is filled with the protagonist's old acquaintances. Upon learning the gravity of the situation in the monster forest, everyone's expressions turn grim. At the same time, the old man makes a major discovery. A presence in the depths warns them to stay away. For this is the evil god who ravaged the world 300 years ago. Upon seeing tens of thousands of monsters launching a massive assault, Demon King realized the gravity of the situation and instantly teleported to the protagonist's side. Once briefed on the situation, the protagonist immediately instructed the others to rally adventurers for the town's defense, while he prepared to head deep into the forest. However, just as the 2 reached the city gates, his fiancée, the Knight Commander, suddenly pounced on him, having been apart for so long. She had missed him dearly. Upon hearing that he was heading to the forest, she insisted on joining him. The protagonist asked her to stay and protect the town, his home, instead. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, the old man was on a total rampage. The protagonist and the Demon King arrived shortly after. After clearing out a portion of the beasts, the protagonist sensed a powerful presence. Waiting just ahead it was none other than the evil god Eren. Clearly, he was eager for a showdown with the apostle of the gods.
Damn, this kid is absolutely incredible.
Not even of age yet, he has already stepped into the realm of the demigods. The casual flick of a high-tier spell, its power pierces the very heavens, making people believe a god has descended upon them. Even a demon king capable of toppling nations is willing to serve as his subordinate. However, the evil god who plagues the world has unleashed a monster stampede, attempting to wipe out all of humanity. Despite the protagonist's overwhelming power, against such an immense scale, one man's strength has its limits, so he must rely on the adventurers and the demon king to take out any stragglers. The demon king held nothing back, immediately summoning the 4 heavenly kings. Though a bit confused at first once they heard the client was the apostle of the gods, they were prepared to give their all and contribute their strength to the cause. Meanwhile, after wiping out a significant portion of the monsters, our hero finally engaged in his first direct clash with the evil god. Since the seal had not been fully broken yet, the evil god could only possess this black dragon for the time being. He continued to battle our hero, while relentlessly summoning more monsters, aiming to overwhelm the city gates through sheer numbers. Realizing this, our hero knew he had to end the fight quickly. He summoned his divine beasts Xiaobai and the little wyvern, and with their help, while they were effective at the start, they ultimately couldn't withstand the enemy's enraged state. Saying this, our hero immediately stepped in to support them, as heartwarming memories flashed through his mind. This invisible power allowed him to reach a state of complete awakening.
Right? I don't even care. Pay the sanctuary. Yeah. I'm heading out anyone. Nanny.
Incredible, but little did he know the evil god had been reduced to ashes from the very start. Unaware of this, our hero continued to charge up his energy, thanks to the warnings from his divine beasts, and the arrival of the Demon King and the old man. Our hero finally realized that he had indeed overdone it. So, the crisis facing the town was finally averted, and the remaining monsters fled back into the forest. As for our hero, he was hailed as the savior of the people. However, the king was furious. After all, that colossal, terrifying pillar of light had made most people believe that a god had descended upon the earth. Left with no choice, our hero could only keep apologizing. He then confessed that he had not only cast earth, tear magic, and had also summoned the Demon King to assist him. Upon hearing this, the king was instantly dumbfounded. Or more accurately, he had grown accustomed to the shock Cain provided. Nonetheless, a reward was due, so before all the ministers, he bestowed upon Cain the rank of Viscount and granted him a territory. However, upon arriving to inspect his new land, Cain realized it was a trial set by his future father-in-law, for the region was actually under the thumb of the Adventurers Guild. Fortunately, with his overwhelming power, it took him only 2.5 days to establish himself as the undisputed lord. He thought a peaceful life had finally begun. But then the Demon King suddenly appeared one day, closely followed by the Demon Queen. It turned out he'd been caught philandering by his wife, and he begged Cain for help, only to be given a stern lecture instead. Even the princess and the duke's daughter joined in to scold him.
Hearing this, the Demon Queen felt immensely gratified. She then dragged the Demon King back home to settle the score.
Shortly thereafter, Cain used architectural magic to build a castle that rivaled the king's own. Witnessing this, his 2 young wives were left speechless.
What? I'm so sorry. Incredible!